This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Thanks, Todd. And I'm really excited to have this opportunity to present and be invited to be the speaker, since a lot of my work on Parkinson's started at Emory now 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, mentioning the timeline. Even following up on some of the introductions, one of the points I wanted to bring across in this talk is there is a changing funding environment to really promote discovery and translation as trying to build on those discoveries to impact human health. A lot of the challenges with the federal funding that was mentioned. There's also challenges with the for-profit funding in terms of venture capital and pharmaceutical companies. And there's an emerging role that private foundations or public foundations, disease-focused foundations are playing as a source of funding and partnership with academic investigators to try to move their projects and ideas forward to the point where they might be able to develop better partnerships with the pharmaceutical industry. And that's why I wanted to just highlight as an example the work that we've done at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which is an example of this emerging field and role that patient-led groups are having. So just to give background for the people that may not know, the Fox Foundation was founded in 2000, so it's a relatively new organization and was clearly founded by Michael J. Fox when he went public with his Parkinson's disease diagnosis. And that's really at the forefront of everything the foundation does, which is really to try to utilize science to better the lives of people with Parkinson's disease. And the clear mission of the foundation focuses on trying to use that science to develop a cure, ultimately improve treatments and ultimately a cure. And the foundation, though, plays a role beyond just funding. We have a scientific staff, and we play a lot of, put a lot of effort into trying to coordinate activities across Parkinson's disease research. And I'll have a video in a couple minutes that really shows some of the concepts behind the foundation strategy. One thing that became clear to Michael when he started the foundation was that when you have a disease, you just imagine that there's somebody at the federal government who's charged with every day trying to orchestrate all the activity in academia and pharmaceutical companies to really push forward for treatments for that disease. And what he found is that that doesn't really exist. It's a really uncoordinated effort that exists. And is there a way to really put the patient interests in the center and move the science forward? Just to give a sense for the scope, in the 12 years, 13 years now of the foundation, over $300 million has been funded to research. And that goes to academics, to biotechs, to pharmaceutical companies, really US, international. It's a very agnostic approach to just find the best science that can lead to new treatments. And just to give a sense for what the foundation focuses on and how we look at drug development, and I really think that this is a straight line. It's not really how it exists, and academia and industry can play roles throughout the whole process. But generally, there's basic discoveries led at academic institutions, funded by the NIH, that are the backbone for any discoveries, any treatments that are made. And while there is a lot of money going at this from the NIH, this funding is under really danger right now in terms of where it's going in the future. On the other far end, the clinical testing. This really, for the most part, is led by the pharmaceutical companies. Very expensive, very risky, very long process, including regulatory requirements. And where the gap is, and this was really highlighted by Dr. Zahoni when he was the head of NIH, is what he called the valley of death. How do we get those discoveries into the hands of the drug developers where they could do the clinical testing? And this is a role where the foundation is trying to play a critical role to provide the funding, research, expertise, to really bridge those gaps, forge those collaborations, and move the projects forward. So just wanted to show now a quick whiteboard video we put together to really highlight the role the foundation's trying to play. So I'm really excited actually to be at this meeting because this is highlighting the work of investigators who are trying to use their knowledge, make discoveries that will have the impact for human health. So I think it's really an important emphasis, and I'm really glad that Todd and his group organized this kind of event, because it's not in the current scheme of reward system something that is required. It's added on what the investigators are doing, and you could see the context through which the patients are really looking to us to make these discoveries. So I just wanted to go through a few examples of specifics of projects that the foundation has been involved in that have allowed the conversion of discoveries in the academic space and now into the hands of industry, and how both the expertise and funding has helped make that happen, again with patient focus as a main goal. So one example in terms of direct therapies, and I actually didn't know who was winning the awards tonight when I selected this one, so I'm going to make a pitch at the end of this. But this was a discovery that started at Lund University that validated a specific glutamate receptor target as a potential therapy for Parkinson's disease. And through the years of funding, this has now been converted to 2 pharmaceutical companies, Biotech Adex Pharmaceuticals and Novartis, that are exploring these in clinical testing for Parkinson's disease. So this is an important role the foundation played in helping to provide that high-risk funding to the academic investigator to develop the data, and then working with the companies, even providing some funding to the companies to help make that clinical trial possible. Why this is now particularly interesting to me today is that the receptor is an mGluR5 antagonist, and I see that one of the awardees has drugs with that characteristic, so I encourage you to test those for Parkinson's if you're interested in the future. But here's another example of a well-known investigator from Emory, originally Jeff Kahn, who's now at Vanderbilt. In this case, the foundation provided $5 million of funding to Jeff Kahn working on a mGluR4 receptor. He developed lead molecules, and just last year announced a partnership with Bristol Myers Squibb to move this forward. So this is another example where the foundation funding has allowed this project to move into the translational pipeline with pharmaceutical partnerships. And finally, a third example in therapeutics is one that took a little longer, but it was a very high-risk project. A neurotrophic factor named Nurturin was discovered at Washington University, St. Louis in 1997, and is now being converted and tested with a gene therapy approach by a company called Serogene with foundation funding for Parkinson's disease. So these examples, I think, are just showing how a foundation as a funding source, particularly with a disease focus, can really help to move those projects from academia into industry and ultimately closer to patients. I just wanted to highlight also another role that foundations are playing, which are not related to direct therapies, and this is really focused on disease knowledge, bringing together pre-competitive consortium that can help to solve large, big science problems related to disease. One example that we're spearheading is a large biomarker study that's called the Parkinson's Progression Markers Initiative, to really understand the natural history of Parkinson's disease, to provide tools that will accelerate clinical testing in this disease. In this study, Emory is one of the 25 sites worldwide. Interesting role the foundation has played is there are 13 industry co-funders of this initiative that are all under the umbrella brought together by the foundation, sort of as a neutral player in that space. So right now, the data is available in real time, can be downloaded throughout the world. There's been 45,000 downloads of this data, and we make it widely available during the course of the study. And the goal, again, is to really accelerate the disease knowledge. One other area that might be of interest to some of the researchers is the foundation makes research tools available, antibodies, animal models, freely available to the research community. Again, to try to get these tools into the hands of as many researchers as possible. One last area that we've really focused on, and it's a role that a lot of foundations are now playing, is to better integrate the patients into the research process. So there's a particular role that only patients can play in research, particularly as it relates to clinical trials and clinical studies, in reporting the effectiveness of a drug, reporting the symptoms that are most impacting quality of life. And it's a real challenge of patient recruitment in these studies. There's very poor participation and retention. Most people don't know they are needed and can be involved in research. Yet the patients are most anxious for the breakthroughs. So a big effort that we're leading, particularly with Michael's message, is the role that patients can play in the research process. In this case, we launched a website that's a match.com for research to get patients to sign up and find trials in their area. And we're really finding a great response to this in terms of accelerating the recruitment of patients into studies, that they're aware that they can make a difference. And I think this is an area you'll see more activity from foundations, particularly collaborating with academic sites to help enroll patients into their studies. So I hope to get across in the brief remarks is really the role that foundations are now playing in helping to accelerate translational science. Foundations can be a source of high risk, high reward funding, not requiring the same level of already determining that the study works to get funding because they have a more urgent need in the patient focus. Collaboration that can be brought under the umbrella of a foundation can bring academia and pharmaceutical companies together to make progress. But there's many challenges ahead, and these, I think, a lot face the funding environment. Pharmaceutical companies are requiring projects to move further and further down the pipeline before they'll really jump in to provide funding and license technologies. And there is this gap. So we need to develop innovative funding models involving academia, NIH, pharmaceuticals, and foundations to really move the most promising projects forward and try to reduce the risk of these high cost investments. And finally, I think really this following up on getting patients involved, making sure the research we're doing, it's clear the impact it could potentially have for patients, even if it's very early stage. One of the introductory speakers talked about how the bar's really been raised on us to show the impact that the research we're doing is having. And I think having that in mind as we're developing projects, even at the very earliest stages, is very important. So I'm really thankful again for the opportunity to present at this, and I want to congratulate all the awardees and to channel Michael, because he always has better quotes than I do. The cures will not just fall out of the sky. We have to build ladders and climb up and reach them, and the people today who are winning these awards are helping us build those ladders. So thank you very much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.